the mission this Monday night to beef up border security. What Ottawa is promising to do to deal with Donald Trump's tariff threat.
The RCMP have been working with the CBSA and others on a list.
And what it won't do. Pipeline politics, who wants the Keystone XL pipeline project revived, and the hurdles in its way. A revelation from the Rocket Man. What superstar Elton John has said about his sight. Plus, celebration and vindication for Black Canadians.
I'm hoping this designation means that the rest of the world gets to hear about Africville.
The international recognition of a once thriving community destroyed by racism.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The federal government is looking at ways to rapidly increase security at the U.S. border, including buying more helicopters, drones, and other technology. It came up when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau went to Florida to have dinner with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Friday, responding to Trump's threat of a 25% tax on all Canadian imports to the U.S. unless Canada cracks down. There was talk at that dinner, too, about reviving the Keystone XL pipeline from Alberta to the U.S. We'll look at how realistic that is in just a moment, but we begin with David Akin and plans for the border.
As the minister in charge of border security, Dominic LeBlanc was at the table at Mar-a-Lago with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump, where the two sides spoke at length about the kind of improvements Canada is ready to make on America's northern border.
The RCMP have been working with the CBSA and others on a list of technology and equipment that would supplement the equipment and technologies they already have.
Global News reported Saturday that that list includes 2 more helicopters for the RCMP, in addition to the 9 helicopters and 22 fixed-wing aircraft the Mounties already operate. LeBlanc confirmed new helicopters are on the way, but would not share any other details.
And we're not going to bring the shopping list of exactly what models of drones we're going to buy or what kind of helicopter, 2 engines, 1 engine.
LeBlanc resisted calls, though, to create new criminal offenses for border violations or give the RCMP or the Canada Border Services Agency new powers.
If we were to undertake a big machinery and government change that may require legislation in the room behind me, I'm not sure it would speak to the urgency of the matter.
The pressure to improve border security is coming not just from Donald Trump, but also from the Trudeau government's political opponents.
If we're going to save Canadian jobs, we need a plan yesterday to fix the disorder at the border.
One border policy expert, though, says more drones or planes or other gear is unlikely to have a measurable impact on border security, though it may be good optics, good security theater.
If we're talking about the politics around Canada sort of showing the Trump administration that they're making an effort to be more vigilant on the border between the U.S. and Canada, then perhaps it could have an impact.
In fact, several experts on both sides of the border described Canada-U.S. security arrangements as piecemeal and uncoordinated. They say authorities on both sides will be better off with less of a focus on new gear and more of a focus on increased cooperation. Donna.
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Energy policy was also on the table at that dinner with Donald Trump. Canada is the largest source of U.S. crude oil imports, and tariffs would be crippling. Now there's talk Trump is interested in reviving the dead Keystone XL pipeline from Alberta to the U.S. Heather Yourex-West looks at how realistic that is.
When it comes to energy policy, the incoming U.S. president has been very clear. Drill, baby, drill toward U.S. energy dominance. So where does Canada fit in?
The energy trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada is the world's most important bilateral energy trading relationship.
The U.S. is the largest consumer of Canadian oil, and Canada would love to export even more. It's why energy policy was an important topic around the table in Florida Friday, as Trudeau and Trump were joined by North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, Trump's pick to lead a newly created National Energy Council, and Julia Neshwat, a vice president at Calgary-based TC Energy.
So you know that energy is a very top priority for the Trump administration when they're talking to Canada, which is good for the energy sector's interests.
TC Energy was also the company building the Keystone XL pipeline that died when U.S. President Joe Biden canceled a key permit on his first day in office in 2021. The infrastructure would have brought Canadian oil south to the U.S., and there are reports Trump would like to see the project revived.
My initial thoughts is that it is going to be very challenging to accomplish that.
Former TC executive Dennis McConaughey says when it comes to Keystone, the obstacles may be more than even a pro-pipeline president can overcome.
On the U.S. side, the capacity for judicial obstruction of just getting the permits done in a timely fashion while Donald Trump is still president. And then on the Canadian side, it is the risk of climate policy on things like emission caps, which are de facto production caps.
Policy highlighting how far apart Canada's current government and the incoming U.S. administration really are when it comes to energy policy. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The Ontario government is targeting Americans with advertising. It's spending millions of dollars on an ad campaign that emphasizes the close economic and cultural ties.
For generations, this ally to the North has been by your side.
The 60-second ad is set to run in the U.S. throughout the holiday season and ahead of the inauguration of the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump in January. In the new year, it will expand to include transit shelters and billboards. The Premier's office says planning the campaign has been underway for months in advance of a new U.S. administration. In Manitoba, excavation and sifting has started in a section of a landfill site where it's believed 2 murdered First Nations women are buried. Police suspect the bodies of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron were dumped in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg in May of 2022. Premier Wab Kinew says based on the dates found on some garbage, including a milk carton and newspapers, it appears searchers are looking in the right area.
We also saw that the consistency and the condition of the material at this level of the landfill is in a situation where we are going to be able to identify items and potentially remains as we find them.
Kinew says it's impossible to know if the search will succeed, but that the families will know everything possible is being done. The provincial and federal governments each committed $20 million to fund the search. A Winnipeg man is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder in the killings of Harris, Myron, Rebecca Comtois, and another unidentified Indigenous woman. An investigation by an Ontario coroner has identified additional deaths linked to residential schools in that province. The investigation found an additional 220 deaths at various residential schools in Ontario. That brings the total number of known deaths in the province to 656. Ontario's residential schools death investigation team was assembled in 2021. It's analyzing public and protected records and doing archival research. The most common cause of death at the schools was infectious disease. The team also uncovered files revealing accidents that today would likely be considered criminal negligence. The mayor of Brampton, Ontario, who campaigned to lead the federal Conservatives in 2022, says he has no new evidence to offer a federal committee of MPs looking into foreign interference. But Patrick Brown, who has been summoned to appear before the committee, says he will comply. An investigation by CBC Radio-Canada quotes unnamed sources who say agents of the Indian government attempted to derail Brown's campaign for the leadership of the federal party. In a statement, Brown says he takes the issue of foreign interference in our democracy very seriously. He believes that no such interference altered the final outcome of the 2022 Conservative leadership race, which Pierre Poilievre won. Brown was disqualified from that leadership race over claims he broke election financing rules. Canada Post says it is waiting for the union's response to its offer of a new framework to restart negotiations. 55,000 postal workers have been on strike for more than 2 weeks. Their union says negotiators are reviewing the new proposal. The strike is having a significant impact. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says small and medium-sized companies have lost an estimated $765 million in earnings because of the labor dispute. And the U.S. Postal Service has now stopped accepting mail headed to Canada. The Canadian government has added the Houthi militant group to its list of terrorist entities. Backed by Iran, the Houthis have carried out attacks against civilian and naval vessels in the Red Sea. The group has operated in Yemen since the early 2000s. Canada's public safety minister says the terrorist designation has immediate legal implications.
It's now a criminal offence to provide material support to this group, and persons seeking to enter Canada who are affiliated with this group will obviously be inadmissible.
It has been almost a year since the United States also listed the Houthis as a terrorist group. The Islamist militants who launched a surprise attack on Syria last week may have been waiting for the ceasefire deal between Lebanon and Israel to be signed before making their move. That's according to the head of the internationally recognized opposition movement in Syria. Redmond Shannon reports on the scale of the attack against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces and how Assad is now relying on allies in Moscow and Tehran.
A backlash from the Assad regime. Video from the volunteer White Helmets humanitarian group appears to show the aftermath of Syrian and Russian airstrikes in northwest Syria. The rebels' surprise attacks taking a swathe of land in Syria's northwest, including the major city of Aleppo.
In Aleppo,
the head of the internationally recognized opposition movement says the strike timing is intentional. Assad's Iran-backed allies in Lebanon, Hezbollah, are currently weakened and distracted.
The moment there were a ceasefire in Lebanon, they found that the opportunity is good for them to start.
For more than 13 years, Syria has been torn apart by civil war, a patchwork of factions. This offensive, led by the Islamist HTS rebel group, the first significant movement in 4 years.
While groups have different agendas, they are all united in their opposition to the Assad regime, their belief that the Assad regime is a corrupt dictatorship.
A day after Iran's foreign minister met with Assad, hundreds of fighters from Iraq reportedly crossed into Syria to support the Assad regime. Analysts say continued support from Assad's allies in Tehran and Moscow are key to what comes next.
The question will be, how much are they willing to do? Considering they have Ukraine to be concerned about.
We also believe it would be helpful if Russia and Iran stopped their destabilizing influence inside Syria.
Washington critical of enemy powers, but the US itself still has 900 troops in Syria to support Kurdish forces. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon appears to be on shaky ground. Lebanese authorities say at least 2 people were killed today in Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon. Both sides have accused each other of breaching the terms agreed to last week. Lebanon claims Israel has violated the truce more than 50 times. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his forces would respond strongly after Iran-backed Hezbollah fired into a disputed border zone. A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department said today the ceasefire has been broadly successful and that Washington and France will look into the allegations. In Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, protests and clashes are continuing after the government suspended negotiations to join the European Union. Thousands of protesters are rallying again outside the country's parliament, facing tear gas and water cannon. Police have detained more than 200 people over the past few days. Their outrage also stems from accusations the governing party rigged October's election to keep itself in power. It's also believed to be seeking closer ties with Russia, which many Georgian people oppose. A winter wallop before winter has even begun. Coming up, the millions in Canada and the U.S. digging out. Plus, millions of Americans are digging out of a huge snowstorm in the Great Lakes region. Some areas got up to 120 centimeters of snow over the weekend. There is more on the way. Lake effect snow warnings are in effect for New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Freezing temperatures and strong winds are also forecast for the upper Midwest and northeastern states. Ontario's cottage country got hit too. More than a meter of snow fell on Highway 11 between Orillia and Huntsville over the weekend. Dozens of vehicles were stranded when that highway was closed. It has since fully reopened. The town of Gravenhurst is under a state of emergency after it got about 140 centimeters of snow. Singer-songwriter Elton John, whose outfits and outrageous glasses are the stuff of legend, is going public about what's happened to his eyes. Last night at the premiere of a new musical, he spoke on stage about his sight. Mike Armstrong explains the impact it's having on Elton John's career.
He wrote the music, but Elton John wasn't as big a part of the new musical The Devil Wears Prada as he wanted to be. Following Sunday night's premiere, he explained why, saying this after congratulating the cast.
I haven't been able to come to many of the previews because, as you know, I've lost my eyesight, so it's hard for me to see it, but I love to hear it. And boy, it's sounding good tonight, okay?
One of Elton John's signatures has always been his eyewear. Well, it's now his eyes that have put his career, at least, on hold. Elton John first announced on Instagram in September he was recovering from a severe eye infection.
Sir Elton John.
There have been appearances in recent weeks. This was meeting King Charles at a charity event. In an interview with ABC's Good Morning America last week, Elton John said he can't see out of his left eye and that his right eye isn't good.
I'm kind of stuck at the moment because I can do something like this, but going into the studio and recording, I don't know.
Well, the film is a classic.
Elton John has struggled with health issues in recent years. He had surgery for prostate cancer in 2017. Despite it all, the 77-year-old says he still considers himself the luckiest man in the world and is still standing. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The American president pardons his son ahead why Joe Biden went back on his word. U.S. President Joe Biden was in the Central African nation of Angola today, the first American president to visit there. Biden's trip is being overshadowed by his decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, who is set to be sentenced this month on gun and tax evasion charges. Biden had said time and time again he would not issue a pardon. Jennifer Johnson on why he suddenly changed his mind.
U.S. President Joe Biden not answering the question as he arrived for an official visit in Africa. Despite saying he would never do it, the president Sunday pardoned his son Hunter on federal gun and tax evasion charges, raising eyebrows from both political parties.
I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
But the president issued a full and unconditional pardon to protect Hunter from potential future legal charges, maintaining Hunter was targeted only because he was his son. Hunter's lawyer agrees.
But for Hunter Biden being the son of Joe Biden, he would have received the plea deal that he was offered, which were a couple of misdemeanors and no time.
Other experts don't agree.
This wasn't any different than any other criminal tax case that we work.
Incoming President-elect Donald Trump wasted no time in calling out Biden's about-face, writing on Truth Social, such an abuse and miscarriage of justice. Presidential pardons are common. Trump has said he may pardon the jailed January 6 insurrectionists, and in 2020 he pardoned his son-in-law's father, a convicted felon. Even some Democrats are suggesting this pardon could tarnish Biden's legacy. A gamble the 82-year-old president, who has already lost 2 children in his lifetime, was apparently willing to take. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Shedding new light on a dark past. Next, the rejuvenation of Nova Scotia's Africville. Halifax is marking an important turning point for former residents and descendants of a community that was destroyed back in the 1960s. Africville was once a thriving black neighborhood founded by former slaves who fled the United States. What they ran into was racism. As Heidi Petrachuk reports, the site is now being recognized by UNESCO as a place of international significance.
It was a joyous celebration of an historic moment for the community of Africville. Emotional for those born in Africville who have stuck together ever since their homes were torn apart.
The world knows our plight. They know where we came from, and they're certainly going to know where we're going, because we're not stopping now.
In the 1960s, the Black community was demolished by the city of Halifax under the guise of urban renewal. 400 residents were forced to relocate. The original church was destroyed in the middle of the night.
Yes, we talk about the destruction of the community of Africville. To me, the real crime was the way the Black people of Africville and other outlying African Nova Scotian communities were treated.
Now the site of the replica Africville Church Museum, a reminder of how racism can affect generations, has been internationally recognized by UNESCO as Canada's first place of history and memory.
The designation is about remembering and honoring Africville's past, of course, but it's also about moving forward and making change.
Not just tell the story, but make it make a difference, make it make an impact.
That this never happens again.
The city apologized in 2010 and there was some compensation, but a promised interpretive center meant to accompany the replica church still hasn't happened. The community hopes this recognition will finally make the center a reality for a greater good.
I would like to think that what happened here today has put Nova Scotia, Halifax, and indeed Canada on the international map.
The fight against racism, one this community knows well and one it vows to continue. Heidi Petrocic, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Monday, December 2nd. We love this time of year because it's when we ask to see your pets getting into the holiday spirit. You can email photos of your furry friends in their cutest festive garb to globalnational@globalnews.ca. My cat, by the way, would never put up with this nonsense. We'll air a selection of them on Christmas Eve. It is a tough competition, so may the best animal win. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.